The story begins with a desperate man asking what she's doing up there and telling her it's dangerous and she should come down. The girl is on the edge of the bridge, about to fall into the river, and voices ask if she's really going to do it and tell her to think carefully. The day is nice to end things, and the girl asks who said she's going to be eliminated. A voice asks if that down there isn't a person, and they realize it is indeed someone being dragged by the current. The girl asks what's going on. People nearby run and say he's heading that way and question how someone could be inside the ice. The girl asks inside? She looks down and sees a huge block of ice. Everyone watches the shadow of someone inside it. It's a man who remembers something from before, standing atop a cliff saying, "There's nowhere left to run." Several ninjas rush toward him trying to attack, but he blocks them. The ninjas look surprised, and the protagonist says too much time has passed. He eliminates them and says it's been 4 days and he can no longer tell the smell of plasma apart. He slashes the enemies with his sword and says he'll end it. The boy sighs and moves his sword, making the trees sway and split in half. The protagonist attacks all the ninjas at once and tells the girl on his back to stay calm because they're all taken care of. A voice says at least 300, and the waterfall is stained with the life fluid of the soldiers and is quite impressed, as expected of Goryo's best swordsman. However, now he sees the end in him and calls him Chok Ryugyom, knowing that was the last strike, and that his body is at its limit due to poison. He says it's unfortunate and asks if that girl is worth more than his own life. The protagonist tells him to shut up. The enemy says, "Then let's end this." The swordsman wonders if he didn't promise. The enemy widens his eyes and stabs him with a dagger, and Chok thinks he would protect her at all costs and wishes her peace. The girl screams no upon seeing them both fall from the cliff. Ryu says he finally got to see his damn face. He stares at his opponent wide-eyed, and the enemy says he likes that look. The protagonist realizes it's Okyan, and the opponent says that makes him the winner. The two fall into the water. In the present time, voices say there's someone inside a fridge. It's the first case since Dooley. One subordinate says now's not the time for jokes and asks about the age calculation result, to which the reply is that he dates back to the Goryo period. The team leader says this could prove cryogenic humans are possible and wonders how he's alive and in good condition. A subordinate questions if all this is necessary and says he might feel violated. John says he wouldn't say that if he saw the graphs and that the body is incomparable to modern humans, to the point they can't even call him human. There's still much to analyze, but the more they look, the more absurd the results get. He is the definition of the unknown. The subordinate says his point is that they should treat him well, and that if they look closely, he's a gift from the ancestors. The leader asks about the gift, and says of course the president is hopeful, but whether he's a gift or a disaster, they'll only know once he's opened. The subordinate asks what it is and says it's impossible, until the protagonist gets up from the stretcher. Elsewhere, a guy is driving with his hand on a woman's leg saying that was nice, and he drives better holding her there. She asks if he grabs other sluts' thighs too, and he says no. Then they hear noises and wonder who's honking. The street is full of people watching, and the swordsman is running fast through traffic. The guy asks what the hell that is, because he's going 80 kilometers per h and the man's still overtaking him, then curses him for not even signaling. They crash into another car, traffic becomes chaos, and someone yells asking where he thinks he's going. People start recording and are shocked, wondering if he's superhuman or what, and whether they should call the police and how much this will cost. Choke keeps running, thinking it's impossible and wondering if it's a dream, because the world looks like nothing he's ever seen. If it's not a dream, then what is it? Then he opens his eyes wide and remembers the moments from before and the lady. In the present, police catch up and surround him, telling him to stop and asking people to clear out for safety. His colleague says he was called in and that the man doesn't seem to be from there, asking how he ended up there. The officer replies they received orders from superiors, no questions, and commands them to bring that man in. And they ask if it's that guy over there with his back turned. Ryu thinks it is and remembers falling into the waterfall with Yon. The officer approaches and tells him not to resist and to come with them. Ji-yom wonders what kind of situation this is. The officer says things will get ugly for both of them if he doesn't comply. The protagonist thinks he thought he had already been finished. The two officers grab him, and the swordsman keeps thinking there's only one explanation. It must be one of Yon's followers, Yoon's specialty. Choke says they're trying to keep him trapped and thinks it's mind manipulation, illusions. The officer says he has no choice and will have to use the taser. Ryu blocks it and asks if it's the presence of lightning. He's shocked, and the team leader asks why they're firing at the same time, and tells the officer to check if he's okay and cuff him. Ji-yom thinks he doesn't know when she casts the illusion on him. He grabs the stun weapons from their hands and, still thinking he needs to escape fast, says not to think they'll keep him locked up with just that. The protagonist throws the officers away, and the people watching and recording ask if this is real and if the police should really be getting thrown like that. The swordsman thinks there's only one way to escape an illusion. Find the key planted inside this world, and this place makes no sense. He stomps the ground, sending cars flying, and Chuck thinks he must go higher to find the key. The soldiers watch and ask if he's even human. Min, furious, asks what's going on. Jong, on the phone, apologizes and says they prepared for a situation like this. The director says to forget the police because not even special forces stand a chance, and they're reporting massive damage. Sang says this confirms he's a being of a completely higher level than humans. Wu asks if he's joking and if that's what he plans to tell the president. A voice says not to be so hard on him. A man sitting in the back seat says he's responsible for everything and that, after all, this is someone from hundreds of years ago and should be powerless against modern weaponry. The helicopter moves, and the protagonist rips off his shirt, stands still, and asks if that's all they've got, and if so, he'll give it his all too. Someone shoots between his feet and calls him an old man, saying this is a weapon, something that makes martial artists like him useless, and he'll be eliminated if he resists. A soldier says he's charging headfirst into this and never backs down, then asks what he's doing now. The swordsman asks if he knows where he's from and says then they'll see who'll be finished, wondering if the sensation in his stomach is what he thinks it is. The soldier watches, impressed, and says he really is an interesting guy and he might even enjoy this. A voice on the phone tells everyone to stay in position because they'll descend personally. The wind grows stronger. An old man descends from the helicopter, and the subordinates say to keep their distance and stay alert. The old man approaches and greets him, introducing himself as the country's representative, President Kang Jikan. The soldiers recognize him, and the president says it's okay, tells them to lower their weapons and fall back. Choke asks if representative means king. Kang replies that he believes it's something like that and first apologizes for welcoming him this way and bids him welcome. He says this place is the future for him, and for them, it's South Korea, and there's much to discuss, and he'll guide him to a better place. Ryu talks about the better place, and the soldiers watch closely. As Jeom reaches out his hand, he draws his sword and slashes, saying so it was him, the key to escaping the illusion. Inside the helicopter, the subordinates watch and say he cut the president's throat. A voice orders them to fire, but the president raises his hand and says to cease fire. The subordinates ask if he's okay, and Kang touches his neck and replies that as they can see, he's fine. He thinks the feeling was so real, and it seemed like he truly intended it, and wonders if he made a mistake. The protagonist says it wasn't a mistake at all and thinks of Yoon, the greatest illusionist in Goryeo. Jik thinks it seems so amateurish and asks what he said. He couldn't hear because of the wind, and wonders about his ridiculous stance. The swordsman thinks she'd never cast such a weak illusion, and that the heavens will punish them for their actions. He remembers the last few minutes and keeps thinking that she's starting to feel very different from an illusion. Choke closes his hand and says he understands, and that this place must be real. In the president's protected residence, a voice apologizes for serving dinner so late and tells him to feel at ease. Ryu is seated and asks where he is. Kang replies that he can consider it a secret base, one they've never used before, but he thinks this is the perfect opportunity to do so, and tells him to try a bit of all the food. It's from the contemporary era. Jeom says it won't be that different. Jik asks if that means he's accepted the fact that he's 800 years in the future. The protagonist responds that to a certain extent, yes. The president says he's glad to hear that, and he must have noticed that being able to move like this is thanks to modern medicine, something impossible in his time. And at this moment, he's only alive because of the medical advancements of the current era. The swordsman says that, in other words, Goryeo has fallen. He lowers his head, and Kang says he can't claim to know how he feels, but tells him not to worry too much. He'll give generous support to help him adapt. In return, he asks if he can request his cooperation. Choke asks about cooperation, and Jik says it won't be anything too complicated. He calls the director, and on the TV, the reporter says it was like a movie. He was super strong, ran alongside cars, and even flew. Rumors are spreading that he might be the person who was inside the Han River Glacier. The journalist agrees and says that topic has been trending lately, the glacier and the mysterious person inside. People speculate that he and the one causing chaos around the city are the same person. Some call him a superhuman, but surprisingly, it was revealed that it was all part of a movie production. The production team claimed that they were aiming for the highest level of realism. Ryu asks what they're talking about. The president replies that they're saying it was just a performance to calm the public since they can't know the truth. People aren't ready to learn about someone like him, a frozen human sent hundreds of years into the future, that not only redefines the understanding of life, but could also lead to huge technological breakthroughs. Many countries have tried to replicate it, but none succeeded so far because the key element, the technology to thaw someone, was missing. But now, the key to unlocking that technology appeared right in front of them. And he'll be honest, for the good of the country and its descendants, he's asking for cooperation in their research. The protagonist stands up and says he's not interested. He walks to the door, opens it, and asks if they really thought this would work, that he'd just live in this era quietly. In front of him are two guards blocking the exit. Kang asks if that's really his answer. The guards grab his arms and the subordinates aim their weapons, and Jik says there's no need to pretend they're his friends anymore. The subordinates shoot, and the president says they'll just put him to sleep in that case. The director thinks he might have resisted a police taser, but there's no way he'll resist tranquilizers strong enough to knock out an elephant. But then Min looks surprised as the tranquilizers don't hit him. A barrier blocked them. The syringes fall to the ground. The swordsman uses his strength and throws the two guards far away. Everyone stares in shock. Choke says he's leaving now. The president says that even if it's dangerous, they have no choice, and orders them to increase power and stop him at all costs. The guards try to hit him, saying he should have just stayed quiet and cooperated. The subordinates surround him and say the moment this touches him, he'll be eliminated. One hits him and says this is 10 times stronger than a taser. A guard wonders if he just hit an afterimage. They say one more hit is enough, they just need to hit him again. Ryu dodges effortlessly. The director thinks that speed is beyond human. As if it were nothing, even with all their powerful weapons, their opponent didn't even bother reacting. They could only watch him leave. Kong says he can't believe they lost him, and that capturing him by force is impossible. The director says they'll need to explore another method. Jik asks if they've already located him. Min says he's not just anyone. It'll require a large-scale search, until someone opens the door and says they've found his location. They ask where, and the subordinate says they don't know why, but he's in a very obvious spot. The rooftop of the tallest building. The protagonist stands on top of the building thinking this place is real. Meanwhile, the subordinate says he just jumped from it. As the swordsman falls, he thinks this reality means nothing to him, and that in this reality he has no purpose. He remembers the lady and the image of her fading, and thinks that not even the people he's meant to protect or eliminate exist here. In this reality, there's no reason for him to exist, and he realizes he should have been finished back then, and truly was. So this will be his end. As he falls, Choke's eyes widen when he sees a poster. He freezes in that moment and wonders if it's Yan, remembering a voice saying he even managed to save that woman. But to look closely, his family members were trapped in an illusion and are eliminating each other. And finally, the moon has risen, marking the beginning of destruction, and he can struggle all he wants, but it will crush him, putting everything beneath its feet. Ryu thinks about the cause of everything and believed he had eliminated it, wondering if that bastard is still alive here in the future. Geom continues falling until he extends his hands, releasing mana between them to soften his landing. He jumps onto a lower building and stares at the poster again with a furious expression. Elsewhere, Kong asks if he really jumped from the rooftop. The subordinates confirm, and Jik asks how that happened and tells them to at least retrieve the body. They reply that he vanished too, but fortunately, there was a witness nearby. The president asks what they said. The subordinates mention the name Yu Yeonwoo, and that he only asked about Yo. There's not a single person in Korea who doesn't know him. He's a world-class action movie actor who from a young age already showed great talent and impressed the whole world with his boldness and courage. Since then, he's caught the attention of many directors both in Asia and the West, starring in numerous hit films. Additionally, thanks to his captivating looks, he's also popular among idols. As a result, the market value of his company has been rising steadily. He is the biggest star and is raising the country's status. A guy with glasses says he's a great man and asks how anyone wouldn't know him. The protagonist wonders if he's truly a great man and realizes that's why his face is everywhere. The man beside him confirms that's right. The swordsman thinks he feels like a fish out of water. Where he comes from, he was nothing like that. And now that someone like him exists in this era, there are only two possibilities. He wonders if it's just someone who looks like Yan, or if it's truly the Yan he once knew and tells him to guide him, hoping it's the second option. He says he needs to find him immediately. They have a lot to talk about. The man says he can't just meet a celebrity like that, especially a global one, and wonders if this guy is a bit crazy. Maybe with some luck he could catch him at the airport, but he'd have to camp there and wait. There's no other way. Choke tears the wallpaper with the image of his supposed enemy and demands a way to meet him immediately. The boy tells him not to do anything to him. Ryu says he won't hurt him if he talks. The boy asks if he promises and says he's serious. There's no way to meet him right now. He read in the news that he traveled abroad some time ago. Geom wonders if he's in a foreign country. In the US, a voice says he made him believe and that he trusted him. When Yu is about to eat, someone hits him and says he doesn't belong here and should leave, then says something about the organization, then apologizes and asks what the next line was again. The photographer says he must be having a hard time adjusting his schedule and asks how many takes this guy has already ruined, delaying the shoot and suspects he's doing it on purpose. He seems really irritated. The man asks what happened. Yon says it's not going to work like this and tells him to hit from the other side next time. If he gets hit on the right again, he might forget his lines completely. They try again until the place begins to shake. James doesn't understand what's happening, and as the lights are about to fall on him, Yu pushes him out of the way. Yon looks furious. People ask what that was, if everything is okay, and if the man is alright. Yu replies that they're fine, and luckily, no one got seriously injured, though he thinks he'll need to visit the hospital. His arm has some glass shards. Later, with his arm bandaged, someone tells Yon he's impressive and asks how he reacted so quickly. Yu says he doesn't know. His body just moved on its own. He says he's fine, but it seems like a lot of the production team came to visit, and he thinks he should give some of the gifts to the hospital staff. He apologizes, saying the filming must have been badly affected because of him, and he's just glad no one got hurt. Hyung says the shoot isn't what worries him right now. Yeon asks what it is. Hyung hesitates and gets nervous while trying to explain. Even Yu asks what he just said. At the Blue House, the president says it was a job well done, but there are still a few matters to handle. Kong walks in, and a voice says he was kept waiting. Is the protagonist, arms crossed. Jik says he really is impressive and thinks he's the only one who could come and go from there whenever he wanted, and it's better that way. He gave him quite a scare yesterday. 9 hours earlier, the president looked surprised to see the swordsman sitting down, asking if the offer to cooperate was still open. Kong says he figured he would come, but there's one condition. He shows a photo of Yu and says he has some connection with that person. Choke says so he already knows and asks if there's any way to introduce him to someone in another country as fast as possible, no questions asked. Jik says only if he promises full cooperation, and just remembered that handshakes didn't exist during the Goryeo dynasty. Ryu shakes his hand and says, of course he promises. In the present time, Jeom asks when he can see him. The president asks if he wants to meet him as soon as possible. The protagonist replies yes, though he figures that would be difficult even for the president, considering the thousands of kilometers in distance. Kong says to go in. The door opens and voices say he has arrived, and that it's an honor to have the president. The swordsman thinks, so this is how they met. Yu introduces himself, and Chuck wonders what the hell he has become. Jik thanks him for coming on such short notice. Yon replies it was nothing. His schedule had just changed at the time. The president asks about his hand. The actor says it's just a small cut and a pleasure to meet him. Ryu introduces himself, and Yu is visibly surprised upon hearing his name, saying he must be the national treasure the president mentioned. It's a pleasure to meet him. He introduces himself too and says he heard they're going to appear in an ad together, and it's a great honor. Kong says now that they've met, they can sit. Yoon calls for the president and says he's very strong. Jeom wonders what's going on and thinks he can't sense his chi. Then he stops shaking his hand and says, sorry, thinking there's not even a spark. Jik asks if he'd like to sit first. He's going to the bathroom for a moment. The director says their squad is watching closely and asks the others why he requested this meeting. They also head to the bathroom. The actor says the Blue House tea is really something else, and tells him to drink some too. The protagonist thinks this man only looks like Yeon. Yu asks if he's feeling okay, and the swordsman thinks this is disappointing. The actor stops drinking, calls his name, stares, and says so he survived. Yeon looks at him and says he doesn't seem happy to see him. Choke asks if he thinks this is funny. Yu says it's been a long time. Ryu thinks he's hiding his chi completely and wonders if he learned that skill after coming to the future. The actor says that even if he kills him here, he'll gain nothing, and asks what he thinks about putting aside his killing intent. Jeom thinks there's no way to find out the truth. Yeon says it looks like he's only just woken up. The protagonist says it looks like he has too, and wonders if he'll actually get answers out of him. He asks if coming to the future was one of his tricks. Yu asks how he'd even be able to do that. The swordsman says he'll ask one last question and wants an honest answer, if the lady is here too. The actor tells him not to sound so threatening and assumes he's talking about the girl he was protecting, then says, is she or is she not? The tea flies into the air as the table is smashed by Choke. Yeon looks shocked and is thrown across the room, destruction happening all around. Ryu says he understands and will find the answer himself. He stares him down, and Yu says, this is strange, asks if he was always like this, and says, it seems like he can go head-to-head with him alone. He tells him to wait a second. Even if he seems indifferent, he assures him they won't be interrupted. He sealed off the area with illusions. To everyone else, it'll look like two friends catching up. And now, enough stalling. Jeom says he's not Okyeon and wonders if what's in his hand is a pine cone. He crushes it with his bare hands. The actor asks what the hell that is now. The protagonist replies that he thinks he'll be sure after taking a better look, and says he hid his chi well until now, but when he defended himself, a little bit leaked out. And the protagonist says he knows that Chi doesn't belong to that bastard. Yu thinks he saw through his disguise and says he didn't expect him to figure it out so quickly. It's quite impressive for someone who just awakened. However, it wasn't Yan, it was just a disguise. The swordsman says he didn't expect her, of all people, to appear. Yoon Un-hye. On the day of the rebellion atop the cliff, he wonders if she wasn't among the eliminated. Yoon says he's making her embarrassed. Chok wonders how she's still alive. Un-hye says that just as he knew about Yu's existence, Lord Yan is an incredibly famous figure in this world and is currently disguised as him, taking care of certain tasks as part of his amazing plans. And she's late for her daily report and will include this major news. He'll be thrilled, and she thinks she already calculated a large portion of his power. She uses the illusion clone and thinks there's no need to lower her guard and says they'll be rewarded if they capture him for Lord Ok Yon, ordering them to get him. Ryu defends himself from the clones, and Yoon wonders if he's releasing that much chi. Jaeom says she's already talked too much. Un-hye calls him an idiot for spending chi in a newly awakened body. It's a great way to ruin the body. The protagonist moves quickly and asks since when her standards apply to him. She widens her eyes in disbelief. The swordsman says it was a slip-up on her part and uses his slash, taking down all the clones at once. Yoon, on the ground, says to eliminate him. Chok says no, that she had definitely been eliminated by his hands before. That day, she fell off the cliff with a lethal wound, and he asks how she managed to travel to the future. Un-hye says she also thought she had died, but when she woke up, she was in a completely different world. After waking up centuries later, she didn't know or understand anything. However, she soon realized it was Lord Ok Yan who allowed her to live in the present. Ryu asks if she's saying that bastard was here before her. She replies that's exactly it and that Lord Ok Yan values her, and she'll be loyal to him until the end. Yoon runs toward him and is about to stab him in the eye, but Jeom, with his great strength, easily throws her far away. Un-hye, on the ground, starts coughing, and the swordsman asks if she really believes that guy saved her, saying that's pretty pathetic. She asks what he means. The protagonist asks how long she's been there. Yoon replies it's been a month. The swordsman asks when her body started rotting. Un-hye wants to know what he's talking about. Chok rips her clothing, pointing to her rotting arm, and says he's been smelling decay for a while now. That bastard probably acted like he was saving her. But in truth, he used a technique that will directly lead her to death, after using her as a disposable tool. Yoon clenches her teeth and says he wouldn't do that and that she's never heard of such a technique. Ryu says it's not normally a technique. It's a blessing she hasn't heard of it, and it seems she's not needed in the future. She calls him a bastard, and Jeom tells her to think, why would he hide the truth and make her work undercover? Because she's not even worth using. Then, a memory flashes in Un-hye's mind of someone touching her. It's zombies, and she wonders if her body will continue rotting and if she'll lose her life. The protagonist says there's a way to prolong her life. The internal chi, the chi infused into her body, needs to be injected, and through this, the body's decay can be prevented, and tells her to watch closely. She notices that the decaying skin is being restored and wonders if Lord Ok-Yan really planned to abandon her after using her. The swordsman says if there are two people capable of helping her with this, it's himself and Ok-Yan, and the choice is hers. Will she choose the one trying to eliminate her, or the one who can save her from this fate? Yoon lowers her head, lifts her shirt with trembling hands, looks to the side and says she wants to live, asking what she needs to do. Un-hye says there's only one thing: become a double agent. Until the director shows up at the door and hears noises, asking what's going on. Someone is calling for help. It's Yoon disguised as Yan, begging for someone to save him. The president asks what happened. Un-hye says he must leave immediately because there's a lunatic inside. The protagonist apologizes and says he'll compensate in any way he can and claims he was just seeing things, thinking there's nothing of value there. The director says he seems stable. Kong says they can talk about compensation later and asks if he's alright. The swordsman says yes and asks Mr. Yu if he wasn't hurt. Disguised Yoon says she's fine and wonders how he dares put on a show so openly, thinking he usually isn't that unstable. Chok crouches down and says that somehow everything turned out fine, but he didn't even get to have a cup of tea, and unfortunately they'll have to wait until next time. He remembers someone asking him what a bodyguard was, and Ryu replied that it was someone who protects with a sword. The person then said that from now on, he would only wield his sword to protect him, save them if they were in danger, protect them with his life, and remember that the one he must protect comes before everything, before even his own life or his parents. Besides, someone who has something to protect isn't easily eliminated. In the present, Jeom is lying on a stretcher, with devices on his chest and machines monitoring his state, while people comment that his condition suddenly became unstable and ask if he's alright. The protagonist sits up and says he's fine and asks how much longer he has to do this. Jong replies that, thanks to his cooperation, They already have enough research material, and if he's tired, they can continue another time. The swordsman says to go ahead and do it because he has a promise to keep and thinks he cared enough to have that dream. Later, at a bakery, Yoon says he's late. Choke removes his hood and says the president appointed someone. She asks if he's being followed. He says it's fine and tells her to sit. Eun-hye asks if he doesn't think something's off and says that since he doesn't even have money, why is he ordering so many drinks? She's not exactly rich either. Ryu says he's the one asking the questions, and Okyeon, only after finding out that Bastard's identity, and Okyeon was part of the family he protected. He thought he died in an accident, but since when was he planning a rebellion? Yoon drinks her beverage and replies that he has many secrets. There must be a reason he wears a mask, and she just wanted to follow his will, so she obeyed orders and doubts he'll get the answers he wants. Jaeom asks if they're the only two who came to the future. Eun-hye replies that as far as she knows, yes, and she even got curious and looked into it, but there was no mention or trace of anyone else. The protagonist asks where Okyeon is and what he's doing. Yoon replies that he's currently abroad and asks if he's thinking of facing him like that. She says Okyeon is stronger than before and asks where he's suddenly looking. The swordsman freezes with an expression of deep anger. Elsewhere, Yu is standing and someone asks what happened. Yeon smiles and says something interesting has appeared. Back at the bakery, Choke stands up and says it's pathetic. Eun-hye asks what he's talking about. Ryu replies that he's adding conditions and thinks that after sensing his presence, he finally realized how blind and miserable he was due to revenge. He asks himself what the most important thing to him is and remembers the young lady. Yoon says that only the two of them are here and even Okyeon, and it can't be. Someone who has something to protect isn't easily eliminated. Jaeum remembers when someone told him to remember that this is the unbreakable law of any bodyguard. In the present, the protagonist says he must find his lady first and reflects on his unwavering law. Eun-hye asks if he has a way to find her. He says he'll have to try. Yoon says it's not easy since he barely remembers her face. The swordsman grabs a pen and tells her not to worry about that. He served her his whole life and remembers everything about her. Eun-hye asks if he's really a bodyguard. Choke finishes the drawing of her. Somewhere else, a girl with an umbrella asks if he was looking for her. Her colleague says she told her they should go together and asks how she could leave without the manager. Choi says she's fine. Her friend calls her stubborn and says that even as a student, she's no different from a celebrity with a crazy fan club and even creepy stalkers, so it's dangerous to be alone. A few days ago, one of them even hid in the hallway. How could she let her go alone? Seon says that was really awful. Her partner says she's still jealous and wonders when she'll get that much attention. Choi says she heard her interview at the Han River got a lot of views and maybe there'll be good news soon. Yoon asks if he thinks it's her and says that as expected of that thing, it's a sea of information about everything and everywhere, and it's amazing that it even has special functions. Ryu says they made progress easily and honestly thought he'd have to use an entire year's worth of chi and tells her to be quiet after observing her for a while until he notices someone screaming. The umbrella falls to the ground and the manager asks who those people are. The two boys ask why she's pretending and if that's why she's getting soaked in the rain. They say not to misunderstand. They're her fans. They're enlisting tomorrow, even if just as public servants, and ask if she could give them a hug to encourage them and maybe a commemorative photo too, saying they rooted for her during hard times and asking if she could at least do that. Eun-hye asks what the hell is going on. Jeom says it definitely doesn't look good and asks if they should just keep watching. He thinks of a dandelion. His lady was small and fragile like a dandelion. She came from a wealthy family but cried a lot, and if she caught a cold, she'd get terribly sick. Someone who must be protected at all costs. The boys hug Choi and say they can finally hug her. Yoon looks to the side surprised. The protagonist remembers his lady when he once defeated a man, and now the girl who took down the two boys and thinks she wasn't weak at all, she was his lady. He approaches them with his head down and they look surprised. The girl steps forward and meets him. The swordsman apologizes, saying he's late, thinks she's his lady, says it's a cold day and tells her to put on his jacket, thinking it's definitely her. The girl moves quickly and hits him. Chuck wonders if she's his lady. The girl says it's been a long time. The protagonist wonders if it's really her and the girl continues, saying it's been a long time since a Saseng fan with that kind of behavior has bothered her. Chok then wonders what's going on and, with sadness in his eyes, asks her name, questioning whether his lady really lost her memory. Confused, she asks if he's not a fan and he replies that he isn't. At that moment, he notices that she hasn't lost her memory and that something is subtly different. The girl, startled, says that she must have mistaken him for someone else, while Chuck thinks that she truly is someone different. With that, the girl bows, saying she's sorry and that it's her fault for jumping to conclusions. Two guys show up saying he's a Sasaeng and to leave it to them. They try to attack Ryu but can't even move him and say he's really strong and to leave it to them. Choi says they're her managers and asks what they're doing. The girl says the guys on the ground are the sasaengs, not him, and Jaeum thinks she only resembles the lady. The managers lift the boys off the ground and ask if she's hurt. Seon says they're too noisy and to just go already. They ask who the long-haired guy is. The girl looks at him and thinks he looks like someone with a story to tell, a really sad one. Elsewhere, there's a bird on a branch. The place looks empty, and the protagonist asks if that's the grave where his lady was buried. Yoon says it's more run down than he expected, actually quite deteriorated, and thinks a lot of time has passed. The swordsman says that info is confirmed by the country's best historian, introduced by the president, and also checked with other sources. The lady from the Min family, the books say she died on the day of the rebellion, and even her belongings were found in the grave. Eun-hye looks to the side and sees him crouched on the ground, screaming, and says, "That's a good expression." Chok thinks he understands now and remembers when he fell with Okyeon, who said that now that they were there, victory was his, and thinks that trying to protect her broke the supreme rule. He should have stayed alive until the end. In the present, Ryu drags his fist through the dirt and thinks he couldn't do it. He grits his teeth and wonders how he can live like this and face her and hates himself for it, as if rivers were overflowing and mountains trembling. But now, his lady's death is confirmed, and that child who looked so much like her, he wonders if it could really be. Somewhere else, the girl opens the door and a voice says, "The dandelion has arrived." The girl says no one is there and asks if they went bankrupt. A boy lying on the couch with a shirt over his face asks what she's talking about and says that even if he's the only employee, he won't abandon the company. The girl says he says that, but he's sleeping there after abandoning his house. Shiryok says not to worry about such minor details and that he came just in time, so she can make him a bowl of ramyeon. The girl asks if she's the only celebrity in that company and says she hasn't made her dazzling debut yet. The CEO complains about neck pain, gets up, and asks why she's acting like that all of a sudden and if she wants one too, and whether he should make 2 bowls. The girl asks if there's any news and says she heard the interview video went viral and many places are trying to reach out. Shai says to wait a bit, everyone's gone crazy lately because of that child. She asks if he's trying to run away like last time. He replies that he's serious. The girl says maybe betting on the school audition is faster and even the teacher evaluations are good, but Daeok is distracted on the phone, repeating yes over and over. The girl asks what's wrong with him. The CEO says he got an interview for a drama with OP Productions. Daewoo got really excited and said it was amazing. It's a big production company. Elsewhere, with flies and drinks around, Lee asks who even conducts an interview in a place like that, and if they don't know she's underage. It doesn't even look open. But since it's a big company, there shouldn't be any problems, and that must be why the boss sent her alone. A guy calls out to her. In another room, he tells her to sit and have a drink, then asks why she's not picking one up. Duel says she's sorry but can't drink because she's underage and asks if this is really an interview. The white-haired man says he made a mistake because the atmosphere was nice, and the boy next to him tells her not to feel pressured and just drink some water. The white-haired man adds that even though it's just water, she shouldn't be nervous, and should think of this more as a meet and greet than a real interview. Lee thinks it's a good opportunity, so she'll do her best. The man asks if she understands what he means. He leans closer and says they'll be in close contact from now on, and that he knows she's had a hard time, but from today on she'll be working and earning money, and things will get easier, and asks if that sounds great. He's about to touch her chest. Doyle stands up, pushes him and says, "Great my ass," and that even if he offered her an entire building, she wouldn't do it. The girl starts feeling dizzy and the 2 guys sitting comment that Shion's taste is something else. She collapses to the floor and someone asks if drugs are necessary. Lee calls them bastards and says they put something in the water. They reply bingo and bet she didn't expect the water to be spiked. Everyone knows Shai got tricked too, and it's fun. Who cares? She drank it all in one gulp. Duel says she's calling him by name even though he's her superior. He asks if he said something wrong and says that he's probably smiling right now while reviewing the script. From what he knows, this is his first job since being dropped, and asks if she heard what she just said. People like that don't give up on their dreams so easily. He says they should use her dream to their advantage. One of them speaks on the phone saying they're making progress without obstacles. Everything's going smoothly and he'll send the file soon. At the president's residence, the protagonist is looking at the sky and thinking about his lady, and that all he has left is revenge. Just like he said, he'll destroy everything and they'll end it all together. A voice says he has a nice place. The swordsman says he's sure he's used enough chi for today. Yoon asks if he looks like a chi-powered car and says she came because there's interesting news. He asks if it's about Okyeon. She replies no, and Chok tells her to leave then. Eun-hye says to just listen. It's about the girl who looked like his lady but had lost her memories and even mistook her because of how similar they were. She wondered if there could be other possibilities and searched through hundreds of books and found something. The girl's name is Min Do-le. She asks if she doesn't belong to the same Min family as his lady and confirms it. She's a descendant of his lady. So she started following her, but now it seems the girl is in trouble. Ryu says so that's why, and asks what's the point? If she thought he'd help just because she's a descendant of his lady, why would he do that? That child is not his lady. Yoon says whatever, she even found her location. Jeom closes the door. Eunhye crosses her arms and notices her phone ringing. She moves quickly and thinks it's annoying, asking if he was looking for her and says she just stepped out for a moment, wondering if she means nothing to him, and thinks maybe she should just leave him. The protagonist is sitting on a chair, deep in thought, and remembers his lady calling him, asking if he can't hold it together, saying this is a disaster. A voice says she must go now, there's no time. His lady asks a favor, whenever he looks back that she might be there. Chuck begins comparing her resemblance to the girl. He rips the paper with Yeon's photo and thinks, no, it's not her, and asks if the girl's name was Min Dul Lee. He thinks she has nothing to do with him and says not to worry about her. He's sure she has someone strong protecting her. Elsewhere, a young man introduces himself as Beck and says he's there for the manager interview. A voice says he's hired. Shar asks if he didn't mention in his resume that he's confident enough to work like family and says that's what he was looking for. Beck asks if he knows he's a rookie. He replies yes, and that training starts tomorrow, but for today he can go home. Daeok thinks he's cute and says that honestly he's the only employee there, and he's already prepared Min's surprise. The interview should be ending, so he calls her. Somewhere else, her phone rings, and the boss asks what that is and what the hell happened while he was in the bathroom. The subordinate apologizes and says that bitch tricked him. When he tried to grope her, she punched him in the face. The boss, furious, starts destroying everything around and asks what the hell they'll do if she calls the police. The subordinate says to calm down, she's still under the drug's effect, she can barely walk and must be nearby. In another corridor, Duel feels like she's going to faint and thinks that if she hadn't lost her phone, she could have hidden and called the police. She needs to keep walking and she must hurry. She hears them running after her and keeps going, trying to get out of there. She just needs to open the door, but she can't. The two men catch her again. The subordinate asks how she dares try to escape and says he's lost his appetite. The boss says her mental strength is impressive to hold on and make it that far and asks what the hell happened. He tells the subordinate to hurry up and finish it so they can leave, and once they're back, he'll show what he's capable of. The subordinate tells him to wait and asks if the ground just shook. The boss says he doesn't know and asks if he's having a seizure or something. The subordinate insists the ground really is shaking. Then they hear a noise, and everything around them trembles. The boss asks if it's an earthquake. The subordinate says he told him so. They notice the lights breaking and say they're having terrible luck today, wondering if they should find a safe spot. But it seems to have stopped, so they decide to go. The protagonist appears at the scene behind them holding a piece of paper. He remembers when he opened that paper and wonders why. He doesn't understand. He just can't leave her behind. He could pretend he doesn't know her, but why did he come here? He thinks the answer is simple. In the present, the swordsman tells them to let her go and thinks it's just a good deed, and tells them to do it carefully. The boss says he scared him and asks where he came from. Chuck thinks that being a good person means helping others. They ask why he's shaking. Ryu keeps thinking it's just a good deed. Jeom, with absurd strength, throws the guy far without effort. The boss hits the ground and the protagonist asks if they didn't hear. He told them to let her go carefully. He looks furiously at the guy and the subordinate starts running in panic, terrified, wondering what that thing was. He threw his boss like a ball. The subordinate gets in the car and starts driving, thinking he needs to escape, but his car lifts off and slams into the ground. A voice says he never said he could leave. It's Chuck, who also says the girl isn't waking up. It's like she was drugged, and it looks like the guy won't answer, so he asks if he should just eliminate him. He says he'll ask only once. Was she poisoned? He says it seems the guy still doesn't get it and demands the antidote now. The subordinate says to wait. She's just drugged, and she'll wake up even without anything. Ryu stomps on his hand and says that if he's lying, he can say goodbye to his neck, and if he understands, then disappear from there. Then, a bunch of guards rush in, saying to capture him. The subordinate asks what's happening. A guard approaches and says they're from the emergency security team and if he doesn't want trouble, he should run. The subordinate says he's going and asks what's going on. Jeom tries to speak with the girl. The guards say from now on they'll take this child. The protagonist asks who he is. The guard replies he doesn't need to know and to hand her over or they'll take her by force. The swordsman says go ahead and try, he's not staying still. They ask who he is. Choke asks what she said and remembers the moments when she came back from school. He picks her up and thinks that since he helped, he also needs to take responsibility. He says he's the manager of this child. The subordinate talks on the phone and a voice says it's very disappointing and asks if the bodyguards from the security company CK have arrived. The voice says someone interfered and asks who it was. The subordinate hesitates and says about that. He hears the guy saying he's the child's manager. The voice asks about the manager, saying there was no information about her having one. The bodyguards say to prove he's her manager. If he can't, they'll take her. Ryu asks how they can prove they're trustworthy enough to leave her with them. He thinks he doesn't like their faces. And besides, he won't leave an unconscious person with the strangers. They say that if that's the case, they'll have to use force. They try to attack him. Ji-yom dodges and thinks he has no choice, then strikes several of them without even making direct contact, wondering if he used too much force and deciding it's best to leave that place. A guard asks if he said he was a manager and calls it nonsense, demanding they capture him. The protagonist, holding the child, easily takes them down with powerful blows. Someone touches her arm and the swordsman attacks, striking and defeating everyone without difficulty, then keeps walking. A voice says, "Sorry." The guards get up from the floor and say they'll have to take it seriously now. The girl asks for permission and wonders why he's there. Choke says she woke up at the right time and asks if she knows those guys. Doel asks who they are. Ryu tells her to close her eyes for a moment. She asks what's going on. The guards say the situation just got complicated, to take care of the guy first, then put the girl to sleep. They count to 3. As they start counting, Ji-yom uses his overwhelming strength to take them down quickly and runs away, asking where to put this. Lee asks what, and the protagonist replies, her. Doel thinks he's really strong. Later, Lei is sitting on the sofa and Shar asks if she really went through all that. She replies that's what she said. Daeok thinks he was too complacent, let his guard down just because it was a big company, and shouldn't have let her go alone. Even if she seems fine, he's sure she's traumatized. He thought it was a good opportunity, but he was a fool. This could have been a disaster. Doyle asks where he's going. Shai replies that he's going to finish those bastards, thinking they were the ones who crossed the line first. Lei asks if he's going to fight a big company. Daeok says he wants that too, and wants to expose them to the whole world. The girl says they're too weak, and this world is unfair. No matter how much they scream or fight, they're the only ones who lose. She tells them not to start a meaningless fight and asks if they understand what she means. She says they'll fight the right way later and pay back today's situation 1,000 times over. But for now, they should start by being thankful. He's an adult, so he knows what comes first. They owe him one. Shai says she speaks really well for someone younger and wants to know how to repay him. The protagonist says he doesn't want anything in return, just more of that. He really likes sweet things. Lee says this guy is a monster when fighting, and it'd be nice to have a manager like him. She finds it a coincidence. He once said he mistook her for someone else, and asks if that person was also beautiful. The swordsman thinks he misjudged her. Then someone says, "Wait," and it's Daeok asking what kind of work he does. Choke replies that he's unemployed. Shai says he thinks it'll work out. He makes a hand gesture and says the two match perfectly, and asks how about working as her manager. Doyle wonders if this guy is really going to be her manager. Elsewhere, Choi congratulates her and says that's a great company and she's so proud, so that's where she said she was going for a meeting. Lee says she doesn't think it's going to work out. Seon asks what she means. Lee thinks it's good she didn't tell her about yesterday and says she's feeling dizzy. She's sure she would have burst into tears. Choi says she's sorry. Duel says that if she really is, then how about helping her? Her friend asks with what? Lee replies, maybe with some tip on how to land a role or a secret for negotiating. Seon wonders if she's exaggerating and says no way, but thinks she knew it. She's an angel and could ask her anything. Then, someone pushes her, saying she's so annoying, taking up all the space. 3 girls say that it's Choi pretending to be cute, a country bumpkin and a hypocrite idiot getting along. That's Janil's gag. Then, a man walks up, asking who they're calling hypocrite, and if they want to feel the weight of spreading rumors. They ask if there's a bear now and tell him to get lost. So annoying. Seon says it's better to get a manager, not just for situations like that, but for other reasons too. It's not just about looks. What matters is that they're trustworthy. In a way, he might be the most trustworthy person. Doyle wonders about trust and remembers Ryu, thinking he's not bad at all. Elsewhere, Ji-yom says she's late. Yoon says not to treat her like a slave. She has her own commitments too. The protagonist asks what kind of commitments. Eun-hye says she doesn't have to share her personal life and asks why he called her. The swordsman says to explain the role of a celebrity manager. Yoon asks which manager he's referring to and why he's even asking that. And she begins to explain that if they're talking about a manager, it's a job that involves taking care of the celebrity's condition, organizing their schedule, and handling various negotiations. In short, it's someone who protects them. In a way, it's similar to the role of an escort warrior. He says he thinks she's right, and Eun-hye asks if he's going to say the reason. Choke replies that he got a job as Duel's manager. Yoon calls him an idiot and says she knew this would happen, and asks if he ended up changing his mind, or he. Ryu says yes. She says he's really shameless. Ji-yom says he honestly learned something from Min. Elsewhere, a voice asks if he failed the mission. The subordinate says he's sorry and that man wasn't normal. The leader asks if he's saying the man wasn't normal. Somewhere else, the protagonist says that while helping her, he fought some people and they were different from modern-era people. Even after being hit with chi, they stood up and fought with renewed determination. In another place, the leader strikes his subordinate, throwing him far and asks what his problem is and if he thinks they are normal, saying it's really shameful and asks if he knows how important that mission was, and that it's something they simply couldn't fail. Elsewhere, the swordsman says that even though it's something they're used to, the people there should have never gone through it, and he thinks, yes, that's the president, where chi doesn't exist. Somewhere else, the leader asks if it's a guy with long hair and says they need to find and figure out who he is. Yoon asks if he sensed traces of chi from them, and if that's true, and she's sure of it. Chok asks why she's making such a fuss and if she knows something. Eun-hye says it can't be, and asks if he didn't say internal chi was extinct in this era and thinks that it's impossible. Ryu says it looks like she got kicked. Yoon asks what he means and where he learned those words, and thinks she's sure it was Okyeon. She remembers him saying the world changed completely. The ecosystem changed over centuries, and the human body lost some functions. And this is a world where science is more developed than martial arts. The power of science is incredible. Even though he hasn't been in this world that long either, he's sure that chi isn't needed here, even for himself. In the present, Guillaume asks how she's still alive and says that besides that, it's not just any chi, and they can't be sure of anything now, so he needs to investigate those guys first. Eun-hye asks if he's leaving already. The protagonist just walks away, thinking he doesn't know what it is. But whatever it is, this time he'll definitely destroy every part of it piece by piece. Elsewhere, someone is amazed, wondering where all those cars came from. His friend asks if he doesn't know this school and says it's Korea's best school, Yongjun High. The boy says so, that's the school the government is investing in. And they say it's almost like a university with so many courses. That's why many famous people graduated from there. Lei hears it and thinks she studies there, and hears them say only rich kids go there and thinks so too. Unlike most students, she got in by luck. Then she falls to the ground. It's the three girls again who made her trip and ask who told her to stand in front of the door. Doyle thinks it was through special admission, and that's why someone like her is studying there. Her friend asks if she's okay. The girls say Choi should stop pretending to be so perfect. It's disgusting to see her worrying about her image in front of that beggar. Lee thinks that's why she annoys them and wonders if she lost her patience and punched one of them in the face. Then her eyes widen when she sees a boy in front of her, asking what will happen if she doesn't stop. They start mocking her for shaking in fear now that Jin has shown up, and ask if she saw her face like that, it won't do. What should they do with her now? Doyle thinks she's too weak to do that. Jin asks if they heard there's a transfer student coming today. The teacher arrives, asking if they didn't hear the bell, and tells everyone to sit down. He says there's a new transfer student today. They start guessing it must be a girl since they don't want another boy and get surprised. They ask if it's him and say it's crazy. That guy has an amazing aura, and somehow it's a face they've never seen before. The student enters and the teacher tells him to introduce himself. Doyle looks surprised. The boy says it's a pleasure to meet them. He puts a finger to his lips, signaling silence, and introduces himself. It's Chuck. Lei asks if that guy is the transfer student, and Ryu remembers earlier when the president asked if he wanted to go to school. He said he had already granted several of his requests, but they were getting weirder and asked if he could know why. Jiom said it was because he had started to take an interest in this world. Kong said he understood. The protagonist asked if it was really impossible for him. Jik looked at him, and the swordsman said that if the director of the National Intelligence Service was going to help, then it probably meant it wasn't possible. The president said that if he had the right age, he could go. In the present, still at school, the students gather around him, saying his hair is really long and asking if he's training to be an idol, saying his face looks like an actor's, and wondering if he's embarrassed and why he isn't saying anything. A voice tells them to move aside. It's Jin, who says his physique is incredible and asks about his routine. Chuck replies that his body simply improves as he cuts people. Someone asks what he means by cutting people. Jin starts laughing and says that's way too funny, and asks what concept he's going for now. The boy with glasses thinks he's sure that guy is the monster from before and wonders if they're the same age, thinking everything will be destroyed if he touches him. Ryu notices something. Someone is making gestures at the window. Jiyeom looks over and sees Lee signaling him to come. In the hallway, she asks him to explain himself and asks if he's a student. The protagonist says yes. Doyle asks why he didn't tell her. He replies that it's because she didn't ask. Lee asks how he got into that school and who the hell he is. The swordsman remembers the president telling him to never reveal his true identity, and that if someone asked how he got in, just say that. Choke says he's a student admitted through a special entry and also a bodyguard, a manager, and thinks that it's not so different from what he's always done, and tells her not to worry because, as instructed, he will protect the celebrity, and thinks the most efficient method is to stay by this girl's side. Lee tells him to wait and not do manager stuff at school, that it'll only cause trouble if rumors spread, and it's better to pretend they don't know each other at school. Besides, she's not a celebrity yet. Then she notices he vanished from in front of her and wonders where he went because she wasn't done talking, thinking he's really fast. A boy is thrown against the wall and the school bully asks if he got the money, why hasn't he brought it yet, and says he already told him he needs to pay the school fee. The boy says he knows it all goes into Jin's pocket. The bully asks what he's talking about and a voice tells him to move. Jin just punched him and calls him class president, asking if he really thinks no one here knows about it. The protagonist asks what this mess is and tells him to calm down and explain, thinking that he was nearby and for a moment felt a faint amount of energy. Jin says he's trying to act smart and that's irritating. The swordsman thinks the energy disappeared as fast as it appeared. The boy with glasses says Jin collects money under the excuse of school fees, and this school is basically Jin's kingdom because he's strong and his family is rich. Even the teachers are afraid of him. In other words, he's the king there. Jin walks by smiling and Chuck asks if that fragile thing is the king. Jin's friends look back and ask if that's the transfer student and who he's calling fragile. Ryu apologizes and says he wasn't trying to provoke him. The bullies say even the way he talks sounds like he's acting and ask if he'll say it wasn't on purpose and if he's trying to climb the ranks, but it looks like they should deal with him now. Ji-yom says it's perfect and asks if it really is. Jin says he has nothing to lose and to settle it now and to hit him first. The protagonist asks if he wants to lose his life. Jin glares and insults him, calling him a show-off and charges at him with clenched fists. Then someone steps in and asks who's bothering the transfer student on his first day. Is it Jin? Jin wonders if the class president called the teacher and says now things are starting to get fun. The teacher says that doing this at school is... Jin cuts him off saying he got it and calls out to the transfer student, saying that from now on things will get fun and he'll show him who he's messing with. The swordsman stares back completely unafraid. Still at school in the cafeteria, Ryu spots an empty seat and asks if he can sit there. Everyone silently leaves the table and someone approaches, asking for permission. The boy with glasses asks if he can sit with him. Ji-yom realizes it's the kid from that time and asks why everyone's attitude suddenly changed toward him. The boy replies that it's an obvious reaction. He's been marked. Like he said, Jin is the king of the school, and if you upset him, your school life will be ruined, and he'll make sure you leave on your own. That's why everyone is avoiding him now, so they don't get marked too. He asks why he let him go, because he's sure he could beat Jin, and he's curious about something. He says that ever since they first met, he felt like he wasn't normal. Even the way he talks is strange, and maybe he's like some superhero from another planet. The instructor calls for the protagonist and tells him to come with him. Somewhere else in the school, he asks what he thinks of the school so far. The swordsman asks what he thinks and says the people called teachers there are unpleasant. Since ancient times, teachers have been people of high principle and socially respected, yet they were asking annoying questions. But he arrived at the right time and asked why he wanted to see him. He realizes it's Yoon in disguise. She says she was curious about that and a few other things. Choke says he found someone using chi in that place. Eun-hye asks if he's jumping straight to the point like that and who it is. Ryu says he doesn't know and hasn't confirmed who it was, but suspects a few people. It happened too fast to be sure, so he tried to create a situation where the user would reveal themselves. It was a good opportunity, but it failed because there were limitations that stopped her from acting as she wanted. Even so, they confirmed the information. Elsewhere, a pair of glasses is on the ground and someone is indeed using chi in the modern world. Jin asks if he just said ah again and orders him to take off his clothes. The boy with glasses, terrified, starts taking them off. His arms are covered in bruises. Jin asks what he's doing and says it's his turn and he should hit him. The boy says he understands and hits Jin's arm. Jin asks why he's so tense. The bully hits him again and says they're just playing. The students say the game is called If You Make a Sound After Getting Punched, Strip, and ask if he saw Moon in the cafeteria trying to be friends with Choke so openly, and if that idiot lost his mind and that this is what happens. And at this rate, he might end up stripping his underwear too. The class rep arrives and tells him to stop now, and remembers Lee saying she was disappointed in him and thought he was different, but in the end, he gave in too. In the present, the class rep says he's sorry. Jin asks sorry for what? The rep thinks he's endured all this because he needs to graduate without trouble and pay it back, and that's why he's sorry. He says he's not talking to Jin. He thinks he's reached his limit and is about to attack, but Ryu blocks it and says he understands. He says he heard Jin is the king of this school, but his behavior is that of a bastard. A voice asks what he just said. It's the bullies saying he came at the right time and telling him to finish what they started. Someone calls out to him and Ji-yom remembers Kong warning him again not to cause trouble, not to put them in a tough situation, and to think carefully before acting. In the present, the protagonist remembers he promised that. The bullies punch him, and the swordsman remembers when he told Junho he wanted to ask something. why he was trying to get close when there's nothing good about being near him. Moon replies that the strong should protect the weak and that Choke is strong, and asks if he's not weak when it comes to adapting to school. He says that honestly, he's not even sure. He just feels like he can't pretend he didn't know. In the present, one of the bullies complains about his hand hurting and asks what the hell is up with that guy. Choke hits him once and knocks him to the ground. The other bully looks terrified and hesitates to get involved. The students watching ask who that guy is, who took down both of them in the blink of an eye. Ryu says that's right and asks if Jin wasn't the one saying he was the king, then tells him to show what he's got. Jin glares and asks if he's curious and says to get ready to be eliminated. The bully charges at him to attack, but Geom stops him with a flick and sends him flying, saying it's pathetic. Jin crashes to the ground and thinks that guy's not worthy and that if someone's going to play king, it should be him. The protagonist remembers earlier and thinks he understands now. He sensed mana when he blocked the attack. In the present, he says it must be exhausting to hide his power. Class president. And he thinks it's a trace of martial chi. Everyone watches closely as Park calls out to the transfer student and asks what he's hiding. People start getting curious about what they're talking about, whispering to each other, thinking they heard something about the class president hiding something, and wondering if they're gay. Either way, the transfer student got himself into trouble because Jin's family isn't a joke, and how will he take responsibility for this? Lee wonders if it was her manager who did that. She looks and notices he's talking to the president, getting curious about what they're discussing. Chuck glances sideways, Duel widens her eyes, and Ryu walks away. Lei is cleaning the board when someone approaches and asks if it's not amazing. It's Choi, saying he's their age and goes to the same school with that face. Dahl agrees, saying she found him suspicious at first. Seon says it's true, and thanks to him, the school might have some peace now, since Jin's reputation is ruined. Somewhere else, the bully asks how he dared mess with him and tells them to call the homeroom teacher because he's going to make him pay, thinking this place is his kingdom. In another area of the school, Choi asks if Geom doesn't seem a bit different and gives off a strange feeling, saying it'd be nice to get close to him. Lei wonders what her problem is, and Seon asks if she should approach him first. Doyle thinks she probably doesn't know yet that he's her manager, and there's no better choice than telling her, so Lee calls her and whispers it in her ear. Choi is surprised and asks if he's a manager, saying she had no idea and promises to keep the secret. Doyle apologizes for not telling her sooner and thinks she told her at the right time. Choi says if he's still a student, it means he doesn't have experience. Le says that's true, and she doesn't either, so it should be fine if they improve together. Seon asks if that's really okay, then agrees, and says he seems more trustworthy than her own manager. The protagonist stands still, remembering the class president asking what he was hiding. The swordsman tells him not to try running and asks when he first manifested Qi. Park asks who he's talking about. Choke answers, Qi Gong. Gook asks what that is. Ryu asks if he was just swinging his fist. The class president replies yes and asks what other way is there to punch and what nonsense they're talking about. In the present, Jaeom closes his eyes, thinking about the energy from earlier. It felt similar yet different at the same time. The teacher slams the desk and asks how he dares to stare at him, what he thinks he's doing on his first day, and if he knows who he's messing with. He asks if the guardian was called because he'll be held responsible. The protagonist says this is shameful. The teacher asks what he just said. Then, someone knocks on the door and the teacher tells them to come in. The person walks in saying they came running as soon as they got the call. It's the director, who says he heard they wanted to meet the boy's guardian. The teacher asks if he's not the director of the National Intelligence Service. Jong asks what about it and says this school is government-sponsored and he's disappointed in their management. The instructor, still in shock, wonders who the student is for a minister to come as his guardian. Wu says the boy can go, and the teacher wonders what the hell is with this kid. The director says to leave unless he wants to be scolded. Choke apologizes. Elsewhere, Yoon asks if the problem was resolved. Ryu asks if she brought what he requested. She replies that she did and that it's her specialty. She got it without anyone noticing, and here it is, information about that boy. Geom says it's a good job. He looks through Park's school record and asks if there's anything unusual. Eun-hye replies that he's quiet, diligent, extremely average. If there's anything strange, it's that he has a strong passion for the school. The protagonist asks about his family and if it's something inherited. Yoon replies she doesn't think so. He asks why, and Eun-hye says he has no relatives, only an older brother. The swordsman thinks this won't be easy and wonders if the class president is connected to those people. He thinks Ok-yeon saying Chi was extinct is only partially true. He searched everywhere until now and wonders what kind of secret they're hiding. Elsewhere, the class president goes up the stairs saying he's back. Towels move and someone asks if he's eaten. He says yes, and the person asks if anything happened at school. Everything goes silent and his brother asks if something really happened. Gook calls him Hyung and says there's a guy at school who uses the same power as him. It's a transfer student who took down the bullies on his first day, and he's sure it's that power. Also, it seems like the guy knows about his power too, though he pretended not to. Even if he doesn't believe it, it's true. His brother asks if he's serious and what the guy looked like. The class president says he was tall, had long hair, and looked kind of like a girl, but that guy? Then Park widens his eyes and notices his brother is no longer there. Somewhere else, a phone rings and a man answers. Young says he found the guy from before, and funny enough, he's a high school student. The boss says he's pissed about what happened. Young apologizes, saying he was on a business trip at the time. The guy asks what he can do to ease his anger. The boss asks if he really needs to be told what to do. The guy punches a tree and says he got it and will bring that guy's head on a platter for him. Elsewhere in the classroom, a boy is impressed and says, "It's amazing." A voice says they heard the transfer student is giving back the money Jill stole from them, and asks how someone who thought he was the king of the school can still show up after such humiliation. Jin asks if that bastard is supported by the president. Choi asks if that means the transfer student is the new king of the school. Doyle says he thinks so, and Seon asks if that isn't amazing and says he doesn't look like it, but he's actually very kind. Junho says he managed to make the school normal again on his first day. The protagonist says it somehow turned out that way. Moon asks how he can be so calm. Chok asks how he separates the trash. Junho tells him not to worry, that he'll explain everything about the school. Ryu says it's fine, he'll ask that guy to explain. The class president says paper goes with paper, cans go with cans, and they ask how he's never done that before. Ji-young asks if this is like a game and why they do it. Gook answers it's to protect the environment and wonders who the hell this guy is and thinks that, judging by his brother's reaction, there's definitely something strange about him. The class president asks if he has any more questions and wonders if he's trying to get close to him. The protagonist replies he'll learn the rest on his own. And right then, it seems like they're the only ones there. Gook wonders if he plans to attack him. Chok touches his shoulder. The class president moves quickly and wonders if he really thought he'd just stand still if attacked. Lei arrives just in time and asks what they're doing and says this looks suspicious, asking if the two are whispering to each other again. Gook says he was teaching him how to separate trash. Ryu agrees. Dool asks if they weren't going to fight. The class rep asks why they'd fight and thinks he almost got in trouble. Le says, come to think of it, only students with special admission are here, and since none of them have friends, the two of them can become friends. Elsewhere, someone asks if everyone is there. Doyle says yes, it's just the two of them, but everyone's here and asks why they were called. The voice asks if she was waiting for an opportunity, wasn't she? And says, that's right, it's a job. She asks what that look is. Shai says a freshman of hers is producing a small web drama. It's just a small role, and since it's a student role, they can just go straight there and filming is tonight. The only problem is it's a bit far and asks if the manager can drive. The protagonist asks about driving. Daeok says to drive that car. Chok asks if it even runs. He replies that even though it's an old Junker, it still works fine. Les says that's not the point. This guy is a teenager and goes to the same school as herself. Shai asks why he didn't say that earlier. Ryu replies it's because she didn't ask. Daeok calls him an idiot and says they haven't signed the contract yet and asks what to do, because there's no time today. Duel asks what they're going to do and if they should just go. Sure hands over a card and says to use it sparingly. Later, the two are on the bus. Guillaume asks if he didn't say to use it sparingly. Lei asks if he has the nerve to say that after eating 5 breads and tells him to wipe the cream off his mouth first. The swordsman says he noticed she seemed close to the class president. She asks if he means Gook and says they're kind of close. They're both students with special admission, so they've seen each other a lot since the first grade. And as he knows, the special admission was created to help students with financial problems, so it was kind of a sense of connection between the underprivileged, but now it's just the two of them left, since the others dropped out because of bullying. And the class rep is quite resilient, maybe because he's influenced by his brother who works in security, and she's heard a bit about his brother. And she asks why he's so curious about him when he should be worried about his own safety. And now he's going to pretend he's asleep, and tells him to sleep. Somewhere else, they say they're going to start filming and to gather up. The protagonist asks if she doesn't want him to go along. Duel asks if he knows how much attention he draws and that she also hates troublesome situations. Chok asks if he himself is troublesome. She replies a bit and says the filming team's bus told him he can rest there. She'll be right back and that he should wait quietly. Ryu says that if he's part of security, then those guys from earlier, and he wonders if he might have lied to him. Gook. And he asks himself if his brother's name is Daehan. Someone enters the bus and says they heard he's a high schooler and part of a security group, and asks if he remembers them. Jiom says it seems like they came from far away and that if they answer his questions properly, he won't have to get up. The first question is whether their target is him or the girl, and he'll just ask one more thing. If he knows someone named Dae. The guard clenches his fist and says he doesn't need to get up, just stay seated. Then the guard widens his eyes. The swordsman, with his great strength, blocks the attack with no difficulty and says there's no need to cause trouble. The guard wonders if he stopped his blow and thinks maybe he didn't use enough strength. The guard grabs his arm and tells him to try blocking this one too, thinking this is his maximum power. His partners ask if he's really using that kind of attack here and how they'll clean up afterward. The leader says he has his pride until he gets hit first and falls on the bench. The protagonist says this bus ended up having something quite useful, and although it's not much, it's a better option than his fist. The guards still insist on attacking, saying they have to succeed this time. Choke dodges their attack and realizes their qigong only activates in certain situations, just like the class reps. He hits the men and says he doesn't want to cause trouble for that kid and thinks that, compared to qigong from the past, Ryu throws his object, hits them, and catches it again, thinking it seems like a cheap imitation. He puts the object back after knocking all of them out, and someone outside thinks that guy seems a little different. He watches him through the door. Jiam opens the door and the guy checks his watch. There's 1 minute and 2 seconds left, and not counting what he did at the door, that's 57 seconds, and they're all useless. It's Day, who also says it always falls to him to clean up after them. The swordsman asks if he's Han. Day asks who he is. The protagonist asks about himself and says he's his ancestor. Han asks ancestor and starts laughing, saying sorry, that was an unexpected answer. Choke says they're similar but different. Day asks what he's talking about. Ryu says he knows a bit about his brother, Guk. Han immediately attacks and asks who the hell he is. Ji-on blocks and asks if he's curious and says he's curious about him too. The swordsman puts the plaque back in place and asks what he thinks about continuing this somewhere else. Elsewhere, Day says he's dying of curiosity, and they ask who the hell he is to have that kind of power. The protagonist says he already told them and will say more if he wins, and the winner gets their answers. Han calls him and moves into attack, saying not to talk like he's really some elder. Choke blocks again. Day asks if he blocked that and wonders if he reacted to that speed, thinking he's good. Han jumps and tries to attack again but can't, and thinks he's reading all his moves, and wonders if that means he's really strong, and thinks that whoever he is, he's at least on the same level as him, or maybe even stronger. Day summons a tiger and thinks he needs to use Qigong. Rahu looks surprised, and Han uses the silent tiger fist and attacks again, but Jian blocks it. Day holds back and the swordsman steps away. Han releases energy through his eyes and clenches his fist, trying one more time, but the protagonist dodges, and Day hits the object in front of him, breaking it in half. Han stops and keeps attacking, saying this ends here, until he no longer sees him and wonders if he disappeared. Choke says, "the silent fist," and asks if he's using it knowing its true meaning, and thinks about the word silent for a moment, and says his qigong isn't supposed to be that loud. Ryu uses his silent tiger fist, and it feels like the whole place went quiet all of a sudden, and Jiam lands a direct hit. Day thinks that's absurd power. He gets thrown far, thinking the guy's skills are on a completely different level. It's like the original ability. The swordsman says that was just the first hit. Elsewhere, Duyul asks if they don't need to take the bus. The protagonist says they're offering a ride and even solved the food issue. The guards who woke up say they'll drive them home. Somewhere else, Han is sleeping and someone punches him in the face. It's Ryu, telling him to wake up and not to worry, because this is his home, and to make it better, his brother isn't there either. Day asks what exactly he wants to know about him. Jiam asks if he's going to tell him. Han replies that a promise is a promise. The swordsman says that while he was sleeping, he already confirmed a few things. His body is empty, a body in which Qigong can't be manifested, so he wondered how he's able to control Qi. Han looks startled, and the protagonist says he found something in his house. Ampules. Though they're different in form from the ones he knows, their characteristics are similar. They artificially implant Qigong, and that explains everything, seeing as he's even sharing them with his brother. And just as he imagined, it seems like Han doesn't know the most important thing about them. Day asks what he's talking about and tells him to explain in a way he can understand. Ryu says that if something goes wrong, it could kill him. Han asks if he's supposed to believe that, wondering what the hell this all means, and that he risked his life to spread Qigong, and even spread his own Qigong. Jiom calls him and says that if he wants to protect his brother, he should stay far away from those people. The two stare at each other and feel something. Day asks what that was, if he felt it too, and wonders what that spine-chilling sensation is, and who's behind such intense energy. Elsewhere, people call out to Yu. Yoon greets him and says it's been a long time. Yeon comments that he seems to be doing well and looks great. Eunhye asks if that's true, and says she's already adapted. Yu says no. At that moment, time stops for those around them. Everything becomes black and white, and Yeon says what she meant was, he strangles her and asks why she's still alive. Yoon thinks it's impossible. The actor tells her to take off her clothes. She wonders if he found them out. Eunhye removes her shirt and asks if something's wrong, thinking she already removed all the qigong from Chuk and could barely endure the pain. Her body had reached its limit and she got careless. Because he can see through it. Yu says she tried hard all this time. She thinks that this might be her end until Yoon opens her eyes wide. And Yeon says she's tougher than expected, that it must have been painful, and tells her not to be upset because he's not throwing her away. He asks what that face is. She wonders about the terrible pain but says it's nothing. The actor asks if she's serious. He smiles and says they should get going since she needs some rest. Time resumes, and the others no longer see him there, asking where he went. Somewhere else, Day smokes a cigarette and says this is weird, wondering if this could lead to his death, and thinks he knows what was said is true. That explains the feeling he's been having for a while, and he wonders if that means the organization was hiding this from him, and whether he should trust the guy, muttering in his thoughts. Someone arrives saying they're back. Han asks if he's already back and thinks he can't stop. The class rep confirms. In another place, Guk calls his brother and asks why he's staring at him like that, like a pervert. Day asks who's staring and tells him to stop using the serums for a while. The company has started monitoring it because the rule is that only members of the organization can use it, and thinks that fortunately, his skin seems normal, unlike his own. His brother asks why out of nowhere, and says he has an important test coming up. Han thinks that even so, there are no guarantees. But this idiot? Until the rep says his nose is bleeding plasma. Day asks why his nose is like that all of a sudden. Gook asks how he's supposed to know. Han, panicking, asks if he got hurt somewhere or is hiding something. His brother asks why he's reacting like that and says it's normal for plasma to come out of your nose from stress. Day asks if that's really true. Elsewhere, people tell everyone to enjoy the meal and call the boss. Shield says he's going to take a look and asks if that's the new serum they developed. They confirm and say that compared to the last one, this is much more aggressive, and they call him to begin testing. A sound plays as they continue explaining that even though they're high-level security personnel who adapted well to the last serum, and it's a guy sitting in the chair who also asks if the power difference is clear and says that the CK value will rise another level. Jian says it'd be great if the others could adapt as well. The boss says that based on his adaptability, it seems his body is blessed. Cha replies that it's not all that. CK asks about distribution. Jian responds that sales are rising steadily, as sellers keep distributing it since it guarantees the best results with just one dose. It's impossible not to be popular, and it's already gaining ground in the medical world as a vitamin serum. The boss says everything's going well except for one thing. He calls for a subordinate, and Han replies that he's there. Shield asks what happened to that guy. Day says, about that. He remembers exchanging blows with Choke, widens his eyes, and stays silent. Cha is also waiting for an answer, and Han says he already took care of him. The boss says he can go. Somewhere else, someone's walking. It's the class rep. And he asks why the transfer student is following him. The protagonist asks what nonsense he's talking about since he's just walking his path, and thinks that until now, he hasn't felt any chi coming from him, even though it's still difficult, and wonders if he's starting to get it. He looks to the side and sees Jin hitting Junho, asking if he thinks his life will change because of the transfer student, and if he really thought he could enjoy school. The bully keeps hitting him and says he's delusional and that this is his school life. His friends watch until someone arrives and tells him to stop. They stop. It's Doyle. She asks if they got scared and thought it was the transfer student. They just stare at her. Lei asks if they've had enough of bullying and says it's better if he stops. Jin asks, and what if I don't want to? The girl moves quickly and the protagonist tells him to try his luck. The bully grits his teeth and says, let's go. And his friends ask if that guy fell from the sky and tell him to get out of there. Choke says that was dangerous. Doyle says he arrived late. Ryu thinks that this kid always ends up in dangerous situations, and even said he was late. And now that he knows about the drug, what matters isn't that girl anymore. She helps the boy off the ground and asks if he's okay. Jium thinks he can't take care of her anymore and wonders if something dangerous happens again, and he misses them. His old comrades. Lee says she only saw them by chance because she was nearby, and Jin will keep doing this as long as he's not watching. And not just with Moon. She's sure he'll bully everyone except him, and worse than before. The swordsman says there's a way to fix that, a more definitive humiliation. If that happens, he'll be completely destroyed, and Junho needs to take down the bully himself. He asks if he really has to, and the protagonist says yes and asks if he thinks he can do it, and thinks that if he doesn't have a companion, he'll teach him to be strong and that he just needs to make one. Mun remembers when he was looking at a magazine, and back in 5th grade, he was bigger than the other kids and was never bullied. He was the one who helped others, and that was his first fight. The fight was scheduled in front of everyone, so he used the time he had to simulate it. Everything was perfect until he got beaten. At first, he thought he'd hit his head because he couldn't think straight, and when he finally got into position, it was too late. It felt like he was going to lose, like every attack would miss, like it was going to hurt a lot, and like he could barely breathe. His body was filled with fear, and he couldn't do anything but get beaten. He wonders if it was a coincidence, and thinks that, funnily enough, that's when he stopped growing. Back in the present, Junho doesn't really get it, and Duel curiously asks what happened and if he got beaten. The protagonist says he struck his acupoint. Moon asks about acupoints and tells him to wait. Acupoints like in Murim manhwas? Le says she has no idea what he's talking about, but like the transfer student said, if you strike an acupoint, your physical strength increases. Chok says he could even fight off 100 students at once. Moon says that's impossible and says that must be why he felt something changing in his body. Somewhere else, Doyle asks if he needs to walk her home. Ryu replies that he's doing his job. Lei says they're almost there. Jaeom says he'll only leave after seeing her enter. She says it's okay and asks where he lives. The swordsman replies it's in Cheonghwa and it's pretty close. Duel says it's far and tells him to walk her. In another place, someone has their tongue out. It's the protagonist eating a popsicle, and he's not even impressed. Lee asks if it's really that good. Choke replies it's sweeter than he expected, and wonders if this is what a popsicle is. Doel says it even looks like it's his first time eating one, and asks if he's hiding something from her, like if he came from the past or something, and says that acupuncture thing was strange too, and even the way he talks. She stops eating the popsicle and says that, come to think of it, Ryu asks what's wrong until someone calls them students, and says it's dangerous for two girls to be out this late at night, that the world is a dangerous place, and they should head home soon. Jiom quickly turns and asks about girls. The old lady falls to the ground and complains about her butt. Le asks if she's okay. The lady says it's so ugly and asks what kind of boy has hair that long. Doyle says she agrees and even finds it kind of weird talking to him. The swordsman thinks, wait, and asks to borrow her purse. The lady clutches her bag and asks what his problem is, telling him to let go. Lee asks if he's gone crazy and tells him to let go now, apologizing and asking if she's running away, telling the lady they're sorry and asking why he did that and what he saw. The protagonist says there was something very dangerous in her bag. Holding a capsule in his hand, he thinks he had no idea this had spread so far. Elsewhere, someone has a book on the table, and Junho thinks maybe there's hope. He says he's not sure and asks if it's true that he got a power, wondering if he'll be able to fight the bully. Mun looks at himself, still the same size, and thinks it's true. He hasn't changed. And even if he has power, he can't fight. Same as always. Still a coward. Somewhere else, a voice says she got there early. Doyle turns and asks what that's about. Chuck is wearing his hair differently, and Lei asks if he tied it up because of what she said yesterday. Ryu says he just did it because it's hot. She teases him, saying that means he didn't like what she said, and asks why he called her there. Jiom answers that it's because nobody here can get a good view of the classroom. Doyle asks about the classroom and if he wants to see whether Junho is going to do it or not. He says yes, since it'll only work if he's not there. Lee asks why he called her, and the swordsman says it's because she'd interfere in the fight, so better to just watch. Elsewhere, someone throws a slipper. It's Jin and his friends beating on Junho again. The bully asks what he's doing and says he should get the phone back. If he brings the slipper, he'll return it and tells him to bite it and bring it back like a little dog. The classmates comment that when the transfer student isn't there, he acts like he owns the place. One of them says to shut up, or he might hear them. The protagonist asks what she thinks Junho will do. Duel watches and says even if she believes in him, it's hard to build courage from nothing, and she doesn't think he can do it. Jin says he's done it before, so he knows. He'll return it if he brings it back like a dog. Choke asks what she thinks and says he thinks the opposite. Mun throws the slipper and hits the bully in the face. Jin looks shocked, and Junho tells him to give his phone back now. The bully calls him a crazy bastard, and his friend says he should just do it and asks if the transfer student is hiding somewhere protecting him, or if he's just gone crazy. Mun says he wants to end this. He tries not to tremble and thinks he's already decided and not to be afraid, saying he's going to end his reign. Lee asks if that's really him and says it looks like he's going to fight Kim first. A lot of people have gathered, and she asks if he'll really be okay, if he can do this. The students watch, surprised. Ryu answers of course not, his acupoint hasn't been properly struck yet. Kim calls him an idiot and says he's pathetic as hell. Junho tries to hit him again, but Kim dodges and lands a hit, telling him to stop with that crap. Mun thinks it feels weird. Kim punches him in the face and says, that's how you throw a punch. His friend says he's going to knock his teeth out and to go easy. Kim keeps beating him without stopping, insulting him, saying now that he's getting his ass kicked, he's waking up and tells him to get up. He's not done yet. Junho remembers when he used to get beat up too. Kim tells him to open his mouth so he can fix his teeth. Mun grits his teeth. Dole asks if he's gone crazy and why he lied to him. Jaeom says that although fear and courage are completely different things, they come from the same source, faith. Junho lands a punch on his opponent and the swordsman continues, saying that if you overcome that barrier, you also break through the acupoint of courage. And that's how you gain the courage to believe in yourself. Moon knocks him to the ground. People ask if he won and say that it's amazing. He knocked out Kim with a single hit. The class rep thinks it wasn't because of his skills, he just got lucky hitting his chin. Junho says next until someone kicks him in the face. It's Jin, asking if he called for him. Mun is thrown far. The bully tells his friend to finish off this loser and asks what's going on. Just how tough is he? Junho tells him not to underestimate him. Jin hits him again and says it reminds him of the past and asks if he still hasn't realized, back in middle school, he's just an idiot. The bully keeps hitting him non-stop, saying he was doing fine until now, and asks why he's doing this out of nowhere, calling him a retard as he hits him. Then someone tells him to stop. It's the protagonist, saying that's enough and telling Junho that Jin isn't an opponent he can beat yet. Mun says he was lying, calls him a liar, and asks if all that talk about acupoints was a lie, saying that's why it felt weird. Jin asks what the hell this bastard is talking about. Junho says that when he used to get beaten up, it hurt a lot. Even so, he realized something, that he always had the chance to change. He asks if he can be given more time and says, as they can see, it's not over yet. Choke says that's it, and to believe in himself. Jin looks to the side and says the situation's gotten weird, like the two of them are in some kind of battle. Moon punches him in the face and says he understood well. The bully insults him and tries to hit back, and Junho dodges, wondering if he should counterattack after dodging. Jin calls him an idiot and punches him, asking if he thought that would work. Mun takes the full hit. The students comment that the punch landed perfectly and the sound was intense, asking if he's acting strange and if he passed out while standing. Junho notices his nose is dripping plasma. The bully hits him again, asking if he's asleep, knocking him to the ground and asking if he thought he could mess with him with just that. He says this bastard is tougher than he thought. Mun wonders why the pain feels tolerable. He gets up and thinks that, come to think of it, his body feels light. He looks back at the transfer student and wonders if he gave him this power. The swordsman keeps staring. Junho gets hit again and wonders what good it is. He doesn't even have combat experience. Jin asks if he still doesn't get it. That once a retard, always a retard. Mun punches him in the face and keeps hitting him non-stop, thinking he's copying manhwas and asking if it worked. Lei asks what that was. Junho thinks he's going to try doing what he couldn't back then. The bully says his nose is dripping plasma and tries to hit him, but Moon remembers the magazine, dodges, and hits him again, thinking he's been thinking about this forever. Jin ends up seriously hurt and holds his head. Junho knocks him down and the students are shocked, asking if he really just threw him to the ground, and if that's the same guy they knew. Moon thinks he knew he'd win with this new strength, but thinking back, the conditions back then were good too. He just didn't believe in himself. He yells that he won and thinks that from now on, he'll try to believe in himself more. Later, Junho puts on some band-aids and says it still hurts, and asks if he hasn't arrived yet, saying he's the one who called him to the rooftop. Then, someone shows up and asks if he's feeling lighter now. It's the transfer student. Moon calls him master and says it felt so good that from now on he's his master. The protagonist says that earlier it looked like he used something similar to Qigong, but in a very different way. Junho replies that he was just copying something he saw in a manhwa. Choke asks if that's some kind of modern martial arts manual. He replies sort of, and thanks him, asking if he gave him a temporary power. Ryu asks if it was that obvious and says it was only temporary. Junho says he, unfortunately, feels like he's back to normal now. Jiom asks if he's sad even though he beat Jin. He replies, of course, saying anyone would want power like that. The swordsman asks if that's true and says he'll give him that power if he helps him. Moon asks what kind of nonsense that is and says obviously he'll help, that it's a disciple's duty. The protagonist asks if he's serious and tells him to follow. Then, he jumps off the rooftop. Junho asks if he really just told him to jump. He grits his teeth and says he's definitely the infernal trainer type. Somewhere else, someone is frying an egg. It's day, asking if it's not time to wake up yet. He calls for his brother and asks if that idiot isn't even going to answer now, saying it feels like he's raising a child. Han lifts the blanket off his body and asks if he's getting up, until he notices something. Elsewhere, Chuck hears a noise and answers a call, saying to go ahead. A voice says they'll cooperate with him, asks if he's listening, and says again that they'll cooperate. Ryu replies that he heard him loud and clear and asks what happened. Day says he needs his help. His brother's condition suddenly got worse, and he's not even waking up. He was fine just a while ago, and he doesn't know what the hell happened. And anyway, he's asking for his help because his little brother is all he has, and maybe you could call that some kind of relief. First, he says to try calling the number he's about to give. Jiom tells him not to worry so much, that he'll do his best. Somewhere else, someone says, yeah, and calls him boss, it's Jion, asking if that really happened and if things got complicated while he was trying to shake off a girl named Lee. He asks what's with the girl, who she is, and if the boss's daughter asked him to handle it. The boss's daughter asks what her dad is doing and tells him to hurry up. Cha asks if she's with him. The boss replies, as always, that he's quick to notice. Jiyeon says he also always listens to his daughter. The boss is playing a game while on the phone and says that what he's trying to say is that he told Day to handle it, but he lied to himself. Cha says he met his brother not long ago. The boss says he doesn't give a damn and asks if he's gone crazy, saying he's asking him to check it out. Jaeon says he gets it, but he should be celebrating because it's finally complete. Cha opens the door and sees dozens of ampules, saying that the 100,000 doses of the new serum are finally being distributed. Just like the effects are amazing, they're also highly addictive, so they've become popular and it won't take long before the whole world is hooked. At Yongjun High School's gym, Day asks if this is the right place and wonders why he was called there, until he hears a sound and looks to the side, asking who's there. Someone appears behind him and asks, "What's this?" It's Yoon, saying he's slower than she thought. Han says so it was her who called him, and asks if a woman thinks she can get his help. Eunhye asks if by any chance he's up for dancing naked in front of her. Day wonders if this woman also has chi and asks her name. She replies with her name. Yoon stares at him and pulls his shirt, saying she feels something familiar. Han pushes her hand away and asks what she's doing. Eunhye says so the drug really exists, and that if he gained that power, he has to deal with the consequences too. He tells her to shut up, and says he already explained everything, then asks when the damn Chuck is coming. Yoon replies that he said he was fixing something. Day questions, fixing something, until someone in a hoodie approaches. It's the protagonist, saying it looks like everyone's here and apologizes for being late, saying he was getting a haircut. He asks what they think, and if he looks more normal now. Han calls him a bastard and asks if he seriously went to a salon. Eunhye asks what that's about and why he suddenly cut his hair. Ryu replies that all this time, he thought this generation had nothing to do with him. However, if he wants to face Yeon and the others in this era, just like him, he needs to understand this place. A dangerous item is spreading across the world. Though they may seem simple, they're a group with the same purpose, so they're going to save the world. But before that, he asks if Yu returned and met that guy. Yoon says no, she just sensed the energy. Jiyeon asks if that's true. Day says wait, do they know who owns that energy? The swordsman says they should get going. She agrees. Han says whatever, it doesn't matter. He just needs to save his brother. The protagonist says he just went to see his brother, and while he was there, he said his condition can't be cured. Other elements have been mixed into the original drug, and he asks if Han didn't know that. He says they need to identify the new components of the serum. That's the priority. And recently, he heard about plans to mass-produce a new serum. Eunhye asks about the new serum. Chok replies that it has intensified effects with much greater risks. Day asks if he's saying he can save his brother if he finds it and wonders if he's telling the truth, thinking no hospital has been able to do anything. Then he notices something and wonders if his skin is healing. Ryu is touching the decaying spot and says he doesn't have to be so suspicious. Of course he can. Han thanks him for being there. Yoon asks if he knows where to find the new serum. Day says that kind of information isn't easy to get. The teams only transport already prepared doses. Eunhye says then they need to find the boss first using that guy. A voice replies they can't. She asks why. Jiyeon says the goal is to destroy the ampules, not to mention the bosses might actually be working for someone else. Han agrees and says it's too soon and way too risky too, but he'll figure something out. They might have to start from the bottom. Yoon says that's going to be a problem. Day says there's something he didn't tell them. Everyone waits in silence. The swordsman, curious, asks what it is. Elsewhere, the teacher calls for the class president and asks about the morning greeting. One of the students says he's absent. They notice that Gook is missing, and Jin didn't show up either. The students laugh and say he's probably too embarrassed to come to school. The teacher tells them to quiet down and skip the greetings for today. Someone calls out to the transfer student, it's Duel, asking if he's heard anything, because Gook isn't the type to skip school. The protagonist says he doesn't know. She calls him a liar. Chok asks if she's worried. She answers that she is. Ryu says he'll be back soon, and remembers when Gook was receiving Qigong. It made him feel relieved. Jaeom was sweating heavily, and said that should prevent things from getting worse, even if he ends up sleeping for the next few months. In the present, Lee asks if he knows something and tells him to tell her. The swordsman places his hand over her mouth and says someone's coming. It's Choi, looking for her. Doyle sees it's her friend and says she's easygoing and has already told her everything. Seon asks what they're doing there. The protagonist asks if they really tell each other everything. They say yes. Le says they're best friends, and that Seon is her best friend. Duel pushes her, telling her to go, and says that, come to think of it, this is the first time they're actually talking properly. Choi, clearly embarrassed, greets him. She looks at him and asks what's wrong. Choke stares at her and remembers Day saying there was something he hadn't told them, that the boss's orders were to get him and Lei, but the original target was Duel. He resolved it by giving a false report. Ryu had asked who his boss was and why he was after that girl. Han replied that he didn't know exactly, but it was probably a request he couldn't refuse. In the present, Guillaume leans in and whispers something in Xun's ear. Her eyes widen in shock and she looks frightened. Duel asks what he told her. Choi runs off and her friend runs after her. Someone jumps onto the rooftop. The swordsman asks if they got information about that boss. Eunhye replies yes. The protagonist asks if his last name is Choi. She asks how he knew, says it's an unexpected situation, and asks if he remembers Gyeong. Choke stays silent and remembers broken branches, several soldiers on the ground, and a huge man standing right in front of him. It's Gyeong, the beast. In the present, Ryu says, of course he remembers. He was one of Yeon's subordinates. Yoon replies that's right, and currently he's the president of CK Shielders, living under the name Choi Jungwon.